Hello and welcome back to All Things Player King, a channel dedicated to the exploration and deconstruction of the play The Player King by Darin Dahms. I think today we're just going to jump right into it. This is Scene 2, Mind Your Spurs from The Player King, and we'll just go ahead and get started. Scene 2, Mind Your Spurs. In a breath, Edwin emerges from the character of Junius. He begins to take off his father's costume and places the pieces with a subtle reverence upon the coat tree. He considers the crown for a time, then he sets it delicately upon the dressing table. When finished, he crosses downstage center. Edwin, to himself. An actor must act. An actor must act. And now I don't know. After this heinous tragedy, after everything that has happened, I just don't know. He becomes aware of the audience, and gathering himself, he addresses them directly, intimately. An actor must act. My father said that. I had no idea what he meant at the time. Myself, I had no aspirations of becoming an actor. I had followed my father around for years and seen his madness, both real and imagined. I had no desire to follow him into this incomprehensible world of narcissists and make-believe. But then, one night, as fate would have it, I was literally thrust upon the stage. My father was playing an engagement at the Boston Museum. The stage manager, who was overwhelmed at all he had to do, corralling the actors, placating my father, seeing that all was well with the scenery and crew, and playing several small roles in the production on top of everything else, finally broke down in complete collapse when told by the producer he would have to play the role of Trestle as well. I must take a moment to correct a grave injustice. The stage manager is perhaps the most thankless job in all the history of the theater. The actor receives his accolades and applause. The scenic artists of the theater receive their public praise. But it is the stage manager for whom there are no awards and there is no public acclaim. And yet this individual is really the unsung hero of every successful production. A round of applause, please, for our stage manager. At any rate, this particular stage manager had finally arrived at the point of intellectual implosion. I can't do this, he cried. It's too much. Now, I just happened to be walking through the wings, bringing tea to my father, when he thrusts his finger at me and pleads, why doesn't he do it? He's got nothing else to do. Little Ted can do it. Next thing I know, I'm being suited up for the role, and I'm handed a handful of sides. The play is about to begin, and my father calls me into his dressing room. He reclines in his chair, smoking a cigar, looking very regal in his Richard III costume, all purples and paste jewels and ermine trim. His feet kicked up on the dressing room table. He scrutinizes me from head to toe, then asks, who is a Trestle? A messenger from Tewkesbury? And what is his mission? To deliver a message that the king's party has been defeated. And how does he make that journey? On horseback? And Where are your spurs, boy? Here, take mine, and mind your spurs. It's the first rule of acting. Mind your spurs. Someone ran into the dressing room and hustled me into the wing where I would make my entrance. I stood there in sheer horror, waiting for my cue. I felt as though I were standing on the edge of some great precipice. The line was said, and I was literally shoved in front of the audience. I stammered out my lines, which I couldn't even hear over the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears. I awkwardly stumbled through the business on the stage, and then I fled in a panic to the cool darkness of the wings. I gasped for breath in the shocked silence, feeling the adrenaline racing through my body. I ran down to the dressing room only to find my father sitting exactly where I had left him. Without looking at me, he says, "Did you do well?" "I think so," I say. "I think so." And from that moment, I knew the meaning of my father's admonishment. An actor must act. Acting is a compulsion. It's like opium or alcohol or breath even. If you are truly an actor, once you have eaten of this fruit, you must always have more. And now I don't know. Oh, well, I'll start here because this is what I'm feeling right now, but I'm surprised, I'm a little surprised at how emotional rereading the scene makes me. It's been a while since I visited these scenes, and I have to say that sharing this scene with you now, took me to a lot of different places, and I viscerally returned to the stages in performance, in my imagination, in my mind, but really it took me to the, kind of the central question of the play, and this is the thing. I hadn't intended to really talk about this immediately, but, as I said before in the introduction, and maybe the previous offering, I found a lot of kinship between Edwin Booth and myself, and I hopefully you will too, as as an actor or an audience member. But really in this scene, what happens is that we're introduced to the character of Edwin Booth, and we have the central problem presented, which is that he does not know whether he can return to the stage. I mean, his entire life has been the theater, and he doesn't know where he's going to go from here after his brother has committed this heinous crime and blackened the name of the Booth family. And this decision is sort of central. This is the arc, and this is the journey that we begin as we move through the play. And at the time I started writing this, the question is central. The question was central to me. What am I going to do? My life was taking me in a direction where I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to act again. And I'm still in that place. I mean, I was, because I put this show together and was able to manufacture opportunities for myself to do it. But outside of that, and now, especially now that I'm back in Portland and still overseeing the care of my mother and having cared for my father and him having passed away, which I'm sure will have that's gonna be something as I move forward. I've gotten older, and now I'm sitting here sharing this with you because it's my act of trying to manifest some sort of connection to the theater life and the theatrical and the creative that I had before, that I had at one time and that I aspired to. And now here I am still dealing with these questions, and I find myself aging out of parts that I wanted to play when I was younger, and not knowing if I'm ever going to be able to get on a stage again or get in front of a camera again. I'm doing this to make my own way here. But anyway, the question that's central to Edwin at this point is very central to the question, to my own questions, and I guess that's why I have a very significant emotional response to this. And I'm hoping that some of you will find this messaging universal. I know you will. I know some of you will. Anyway, I guess I just wanted to share that because I was feeling that. I guess I will move into this, since we're here, I'll move into this next thing I wanted to talk about, and that's the question of where is the actor? Where is the actor? What do I mean by that? As actors, we wear masks. We put on these characters. We put on the cloak of a character and go out, and it allows us to behave in certain ways. But really, your source as an actor is yourself. That's the only place it's really the only thing you have. Your experience, your sensibilities, and most particularly your imagination. Now, I love going out and doing research and doing all of those things and getting those pieces together and making those discoveries, but what all of those things do is fuel the fire that's already inside you. And there's this idea when you're on stage of staying in character. What is character? I mean, there are huge philosophical discussions in the acting community and the theater community about what is character. A character is what they do, what they say, the actions that they take, and language being an action. I think language is an action. You're doing something with the language that you use as an actor. But these things start to define the character through the arc of the story. So we see the character emerge based on the actions that they take. But beneath that character is still the actor. And one of the things, and because I have this kind of sympathetic relationship with the character of Edwin Booth, and to some varying degrees with Junius Brutus Booth and with John Wilkes Booth, I feel there are times when I come to the surface through the words and actions of the character, like this, for instance, this. And in writing this piece, there are several instances where it may seem as though I am more present on stage myself than some of the characters I'm professing to portray. And that's not an accident, because my aesthetic for theater is theatrical. We all go into a theater and we have like this sort of unspoken agreement that we as members of the audience are going to suspend our disbelief, and the actors on the stage and the people, the technicians and the director and people working the magic are going to do their best to create this kind of illusion so that we're helping you in your suspension of helping you, the audience, in your suspension of disbelief. But beneath that agreement is the understanding that we know that those are actors upon the stage. And those actors upon the stage know that they are performing in a really contrived circumstance to a theater filled with people. And so this idea invented by, I'm going to ramble, but this idea invented by Diderot of the fourth wall, and that, we're imagining something and that the actors are contained in a space. I mean, there's a really great documentary film out there about the mounting of a Sam Shepard play somewhere. I think it's titled The So-Called Disaster, and it's got Sean Penn and Nick Nolte and Woody Harrelson and Cheech Marin and a few other people. They were all in this play that was being mounted. That Sam Shepard was directing. And one night at Notes, it was really endearing to see this because they're sitting in the theater getting notes after a rehearsal. And Woody Harrelson says, so I have a question. He raises his hand, and Sam's like, yes. And he's like, what do we see on the fourth wall? And Sam's like, what? He's like, well, on this fourth wall here, what are we imagining? What are we seeing? And Sam Shepard takes a moment, and he's like, well, yeah, the fourth wall, that was an invention of the 18th century, and it's largely gone away. When you look out toward the audience, what you see is the audience. We all know they're there, and they're sitting there looking at you. So when you're performing, you see the audience. And that came from Sam Shepard to Woody Harrelson during this, So, and I think that's, aesthetically to me, I really dig into that. So there is an illusion that we try to create, but the illusion... it is only an illusion. And there are times in this play where I wanted to step through that illusion and speak directly to the audience as myself, or more as myself directly. And then part of the challenge then would be like, I'm going to lose, like the challenge was going to be, I might lose the audience. They've created that we have this agreement and they're walking with me, but now I'm breaking the terms of the agreement for a moment. So then the question is, can I get them back? For instance, in this scene, I step out, and I'll talk about this more in a moment, but I step out and I talk about the stage manager and stage managers, and then I ask for a round of applause. Well, obviously, there wouldn't be a stage manager sitting in a glass booth running electric lights. At the time, Edwin would be performing on the stage. And by calling this out, I'm calling out the illusion of the whole thing. This obviously is not the 1860s. I'm an actor on a stage performing under electric lights to an audience with a stage manager sitting up in a glass booth. And I did that on purpose, and I did it for a reason. And part of the reason was the challenge of doing it and then seeing how quickly I could get the audience back into the groove. And what I discovered was the audience is pretty willing to do that. They're pretty willing to step in and out if you give them the opportunity. They're as imaginative and as creative as you are upon the stage. And this goes back to my idea of not holding the audience's hand. So I challenge them. I challenge myself. I've rambled, but something I just wanted to touch upon. Now, since I talked about that moment, let's talk about stage managers for a moment. I do not know exactly why I felt compelled when writing this piece to include this about the stage managers. I had not yet met my stage manager for the show or any of the shows. But my previous relationship with certain stage managers, I felt like I owed them something. I feel like theater owes them something, because those of you who have acted on stage know, especially the ones who are aware, that are self-aware, that the stage manager is really the backbone of the show. They are the person who holds the whole operation together. They're the ones that they're the go-to person dealing with personalities and problems, and they're the one that sets everything up. And they do so much work, and it requires a very specific kind of personality. I've worked in virtually every aspect of the theater, but the one thing stage management is not my bag. It requires too much organizational thought. And it's not something that I feel comfortable or capable of doing. And I have a huge amount of respect for the stage managers, for good stage managers, and the ones who do it. And I wanted to say that this play that I was writing was about theater and about my feelings on theater. So I needed to take a moment to thank the stage managers. It was important to me when I was writing. So this was the first moment where I step out and I did that. And speaking of the stage managers, so the very first production of this was at the Patel Center. The Player King was at the Patel Center in Mishawaka, and I was up there focusing lights at the Patel Center. I'm rehearsing the show, but I'm also up there focusing the lights and programming the light board and doing everything, essentially, all the hands-on stuff by myself while I'm rehearsing and trying to get this thing up on its feet for the first time, writing and rewriting and doing all this stuff. But at that point I knew, I was like, okay, I need somebody to run the lights. I need somebody to be a stage manager for me. I'm going to need some help. I need that sort of assurance. And it just so happened that my friend, Brad Hyland, who was helping me, sat me down to write and was producing the show, his daughter, Ellie Hyland, she had just stage managed a show at Mishawaka High School, my alma mater. Brad's alma mater. She was going to school there, and she had just finished stage managing and running lights for a show at Mishawaka High School. And Brad was like, hey, maybe you should ask Ellie. Maybe she'll want to do it. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. So, and I think she was a sophomore at the time, I think. But I did. I went and asked her, and she, in typical high school teenager fashion, she was like, yeah, okay. Didn't know how excited she was about the prospect, but anyway, I brought her in, showed her the light board, I told her how to give time calls for me in the dressing room. And she put on that hat, and she did an excellent job. So the first person, Ellie Hyland, is the first stage manager I would like to thank in this litany. The second one. So when I got to Los Angeles and was doing this at Son of Semele Theater, I needed a stage manager there, and through various, and I had gotten a stage manager, and just before opening, I don't know if she was ill or something, or got a more lucrative gig, which I can't blame her for. She had to back out right at the last minute. And she just recommended this girl who was going to Los Angeles Community College for theater, studying theater, and was like aspiring stage manager. And sight unseen, I called this girl in and asked her if she would be willing to stage manage my show. And she came in, Maggie Marks, and she jumped into it, and I thank God I could not have been put in better hands. She was so amazing and so professional, and she remained dedicated to the show even after it moved from Son of Semele over to the Met Theater, and she stage managed for me for many, many, many performances, and she was just a joy to work with. And doing a one-man show and being friggin' nervous all the time, and nerves, that reminds me. But being nervous all the time and everything, and she was just a rock. She knew her stuff. She was awesome. She would do anything. She ran the lights. She would come in and do box office some nights. She was just fantastic. So I can't thank you enough, Maggie Marks. So I guess the thing that I was trying to capture in this scene to Mind Your Spurs was sort of the terror and excitement that an actor feels going on stage in front of an audience for the first time, or any time, really. I mean, myself, I don't know about you as an actor, but I'm terrified every time I take the stage, every time I take the stage. But the moment, the moments leading up to that first entrance are just horrifying to me, always, and they always have been. And I think that's why so much of actors' training revolves around relaxation, maybe, for me. And I myself have I have a regimented, I'm a warm-up horror, and I have a regimented process that I go through before taking the stage every time. It's to get myself mentally and physically and mentally prepared to take that stage, to step over that precipice. I don't have a very specific recollection of the first time I took the stage, but I will say that, but I do want to share that I do have a very clear and vivid memory of the first time that I sort of got it. I was playing Trenio in a production of Taming of the Shrew and undergrad. And I just remember being, down. I was far downstage left in the middle of some business. And the rest of the cast was upstage of me, spread out in the scene. Was toward the end of the play. All kinds of shenanigans going on. And, I think that as a young actor and a green actor, especially starting out, you're overwhelmed by having to memorize a bunch of lines, and then deal with the anxiety inherent in stepping upon the stage and performing in front of an audience, and you're trying to do everything right. You're listening for your cue, and you want to say your lines, and you don't want to stumble over your lines. And if you do stumble, there's this immediate flippin' panic that runs through your entire body, and you feel like it's the end of the world suddenly, and you're trying to capture, remember where you are, and you're really just trying to make it to the end of the play. And then when you get to the end of the play and you get to go out and take your curtain call, it's it's not so much like I've earned this or we've been through this journey together. It's like, oh, I made it. Thank you. Thank you, God. I made it. And that's really, I think, for a lot of for young actors, the process. And, and that's where I was still at this point, probably my freshman year at Indiana University at South Bend. And when Warren Pepperdine was directing the show, and I just remember being downstage, and far downstage left, and looking back over my shoulder at the rest of the activity, the rest of the action going on about the stage. And it was like a bubble burst. Viscerally, it was literally like, I was contained inside this thing, and it just, the bubble that was containing me, being inside my own head, dealing with all of those things that a young actor deals with, it burst. And when it burst, it opened up that world, and I realized that I was standing in this place of life and relationship and all of these other people on the stage. There was a connection and an interactivity, and it was like there were threads connecting us all in that space, and there was a story being told in and a life being lived that we were all participating in. And I remember that moment so viscerally. And it immediately changed everything, my understanding and everything. And I immediately in that moment grasped the wonder of this experience. It's just such a specific moment. I wanted to share it with you. Now, another thing that I wanted to share, I guess, is the reason I got into theater to begin with, and I'll be quite honest here, is it was my, I was in high school. I had two friends through Boy Scouts who I really admired and really looked up to, Aaron Bobson and Paul Norcus. They were a year or 2 years older than me, respectively. And boy, I really admired those guys and envied those guys and looked up to them. And they were always dating really cute girls. I thought they always had cute girlfriends, and I was like, And they were doing theater. They were in the theater, and I was like, I want to get in on that action, So I literally went to my first audition my sophomore year in high school to break into that world and surround myself with pretty people, That was the puerile reason for getting into that to begin with. And, and thankfully, Paul has remained a dear friend and a life mentor and a guide and an advocate all these years. And throughout the thanks where I can. But yeah. Anyway, going back to the play, I put in this scene, the Mind Your Spurs, this trestle scene, So this is the Boston Museum. And again, they were playing a museum because this is still in a time when theater was not necessarily looked highly upon, and oftentimes theaters would be closed and the actors would have to play at other locations for whatever reason. And at this point, they were playing the Boston Museum. And it really did happen. And there was, and this idea of minding your spurs relates to the details, paying attention to the details of the performance of the actor. And that's kind of where Junius is coming from in that scene, mind you. And then there's another part of this story where when Edwin runs downstairs after the performance to greet his father, and his father's sitting there, there's the indication that his father is actually kind of winded and had gone out and seen his performance and then came back downstairs to pretend like he didn't really, very nonchalant about it. That kind of didn't make it exactly into the play. And then also, there's another story later on when Edwin is 17. By that time, he's been performing from the time he played Trestle until this time when he's 17. He had been performing small parts in the plays with his father as they toured, and was pleased to see his name in the program, etc. But this particular, it was in Manhattan. I can't remember exactly the theater, but Junius was playing the Richard III, and he got it into his bonnet that he could not perform that night. He said he was ill and refused to go upon the stage, and the producers were out of their mind because he was refusing to go on stage, and they were trying to get Edwin to convince him to perform. It was Edwin's job to take care of his father and make sure he performed, and Edwin's like, please, Father, you have to go on the stage. And Junius just refused to perform. And finally, he just threw his costume at Edwin. Edwin's 17. He threw his costume at Edwin and said essentially, well, you're so eager to have Richard perform tonight. Why don't you do it? And the producer was like, yeah. So they bundled Edwin into Junius's costume, and Edwin performed Richard III that night to a quiet and rapt audience who got something that they did not expect. But certainly during that performance, Edwin came downstairs and Junius was sitting there like he hadn't paid any attention, but he was pretty sure that his father had watched the whole thing. Yeah. Yeah. Which just reminds me that my father was a staunch advocate of my incredibly supportive, saw every single performance that he could possibly see. Yeah. Mind Your Spurs. So really, this is a theme about paying attention to detail, and then the Spurs become an element that we return to later in the story. And if you're familiar with the history, you probably know exactly what I'm referring to. But mind your Spurs. As an actor, you have to pay attention to the details. You have to know where you're going. Tewksbury, where are you going? Where are you coming from? And where are you going? And what is your mission? And what is your objective? All of these things are encapsulated in this little dialogue between Junius and Edwin. It contains acting theory. At least, I hope it does. Mind your Spurs. Empowering objects. Personalizing objects. It's one of those tasks that an actor has. It's an opportunity that an actor has when they're in performance, on stage or in film or television, that many times opportunities will arise where you have something that's important to the character. And as an actor, we need to bring life to that object so that the object itself has a past and a present and a potential future to the character, which brings more life and more truth to the performance. And characters, actors do that in a myriad of different ways. I've seen brilliant actors do brilliant things with objects, creating tactile sense, creating history, bringing personal objects to shows. I've heard stories about it. Anyway, this is one of the things I wanted to do with the objects that I had at hand in The Player King, especially since I didn't have much else to work with. The objects and the costumes were essential, were going to be it. The first thing I'll touch on is just the cape, the ermine cape, because I have such a visceral experience of using it in the production. It starts at this first scene. Junius is in the cape, and then we transition from Junius into Edwin. And in these transitions, and I call transitions, I don't know, this is a weird thing, I call it interstitia. It's the thing that connects. It's these moments that connect one scene to another scene, and there's activity happening in that interstitia. And I wanted all of the transitions on stage to be happening right in front of the audience. The changes from one character to another character, from Junius to Edwin, to happen in front of the audience during these moments of transition, this interstitia. So the story is being told, still being told through the transitions, which I was kind of taking my time with. And the first part of that for me was moving from Junius to Edwin and setting the crown down on the table, which I will get to, but taking off the cape and holding it and feeling that tactile sense of it, and then taking a breath of it and smelling my father. Smelling my father in the cape, and then laying it down in front of that dressing room table. It was such a fulfilling moment, fulfilling experience. The cape itself I got that when I first performed at the Patel Center in Mishawaka. It came with a king outfit package, because I didn't have any money to create costumes, and at that time I had a plastic crown, I used the plastic crown from that thing for that first performance, and that cape was from the first performance, and it stays with me through all the other performances. It travels with me. Many times I've thought about replacing it, but now it's infused with its own kind of energy, I may augment it at some point in the future, but the cape will remain the same, I think. It has its own energy. It's toured with me now. It's part of the show. It's part of the show. So the cape is the first thing. Second thing I guess I should talk about, and probably, of course, the central thing is the crown. Because the crown, of course, the player king, the crown is really central to the telling of the story. And if you track the journey of the crown through the play, it really closely mirrors the journey of the crown through the lives of Junius and Edwin, Junius Brutus Booth and Edwin Booth. I was just rereading and researching and tracking that crown. So in a way, the crown is a fourth character. There is a kind of biography of the crown that runs through the spine of the play, and we follow the play from the opening scenes with Junius. Spoiler alert, to the very end of the play with Edwin. And, I wanted that crown to be something important and special. Now, when I first performed it, like I said, I had this plastic crown with these, fakey jewels on it and everything, and I knew I wanted something else. For later on. So I'm trying to think of the story. At some point I performed in a play called, it was a re-envisioning of Macbeth done by Sidicus Productions, with Louis Patelli and Chaz, and directed by Robert Richmond. And I was really excited this was in LA, and I was really excited to have the opportunity to work with Robert Richmond again, who had directed me in a show in grad school, and one of the most fantastic directors I've ever worked with. Very influential. Sadly, he passed away a couple years ago. But he had come to LA to direct the show, and Louis contacted me about finding an audition space, and I was like, I will get you an audition space if I can audition for the show. and ended up being in that. And I have a whole story about that show. But my point is, in that show, there was a crown that they had as a, as a piece. And it was like so solid. It was made of brass, I think, and really hefty and meaty. And I was like, I want a crown like this. When I started working on the Player King, I was like, that's the crown I want. I want that crown. And I shopped around. I couldn't find anything. And I finally decided, you know what? I'm going to have to do this myself. I'm going to have to make this myself. So then I started going to Home Depot and trying to find the right materials and Michael's and trying to shop around and find these materials to make this crown. And I literally finally, I finally got a brass door plate, brass kick plate from Home Depot and some metal shears. And I sketched out the crown and measured, like this was in my hotel or my apartment in my horrible apartment in Koreatown. And I sat up late at night crafting this crown by hand, cutting it out of this brass kick plate with these metal shears. And my fingers got all cut up, like from the metal and everything. And then I had to sand it down, and then I had to figure out how to shape it, and then I had to figure out how to connect it in the back with this like metal epoxy. And then I had gotten all these gems, these magical gems from Michael's to decorate it, and I wanted it to be like this perfect thing. And so I crafted that thing by hand from my imagination of what this crown should be. And it is now the crown in the show. And it's got my blood in it, and now it has now been baptized. It is a holy thing. It's a holy relic. And when I perform the show, it is empowered with this kind of sanctity, especially coming from Edwin. For Junius, it's this thing which he aspires to. For Edwin, it's this mantle he needs. He wants to inherit, or is afraid of inheriting. It's the obligations he has. It's the expectations that are put upon him. All of these things it's his fears and his hopes and his dreams and his memories and his sorrow and his grief. And all of these things are infused into this crown. And I'm quite adamant about this. And I think about that when you're performing as an actor and you have this thing on stage. It's not a prop. It's a relic. Whatever it is a relic. Infuse it. Give it power. Give it personality and importance and a journey. That's what I would say. That's what I would admonish you to do as an actor. And it brings me joy to have done it. It comes from inside. Oh, I ramble on. The Player King. What is a king without his crown? The last thing I'll sort of talk about is the makeup kit. The Junius employs in that first scene, and that leads him into the seven ages of man speech. Now, again, I wanted this something to be important and empowered, and I hoped at one point when my daughter was very young that I would find time to have her help me decorate and create this box. And it never quite happened that way. I said the box was something that I purchased at Michael's, and then I stained, and eventually I wanted my daughter to paint it with me and decorate it, to be filled with all of that. And that never really happened. But it doesn't mean but now the box is kind of infused with this longing or this sorrow or this regret. It still has an emotional reverberation because of that. But then inside the makeup kit, then there's the makeup that I used during the show. But in the inside of the box, I wanted it to open and have like this gold radiance flow up, like, like, what is this? Like, like the suitcase from Pulp Fiction or something, metaphorically anyway. But so inside the box, I put, a photograph of my daughter and some pictures that she drew, and I can't remember exactly what's in there. All of this is in storage in Los Angeles right now, and someday I'll be able to afford to get it out. And I have to save those things before they're lost. But after the first production of The Player King, a friend of mine through high school, we didn't go to high school together, but she was a mutual friend from somebody that I did go to high school with, and we've somehow managed to maintain a friendship over these years. And it became deepened because of this performance at the Battelle Center in Mishawaka. Kara brought her family to see The Player King. And shortly after, I think I had returned to Los Angeles, and shortly after, I got a letter from her, a letter from Kara. And in the letter, she described to me how the performance reminded her fondly and sadly of her father. And this is something I did not know or had forgotten. But her father had took his own life when she was very young. And I think I knew this in the past, but I had forgotten it. And she reminded me of this. But her father had been very involved in community theater, and performing in theater was one of the things that had brought him joy. And Kara had remembered running lines with him, going to see him perform at the local community theaters when she was a child, and seeing the performance of The Player King brought back all of these memories and emotions for her. At least that's what she expressed to me in this letter. And it was very, very moving. And you can only hope as an artist or an actor to have your work have that kind of connection, make that kind of relationship. And it rekindled these kind of things with these memories for her and her father. And I got that letter. I was so moved, so humbled and so moved. And I asked her if she had a picture of her father, or of her and her father, that I could have. And she said, yes, why? And I said, I want to put it in this box. I want to keep it in this makeup kit, so it'll always be with me on stage, so your father will be with me on stage, and you will know that when I am performing, he is too. Anyway, I guess that's a good place to stop for today. Thank you. I hope to see you again soon. Um, and just because I'm doing this thing, I just wanted to shout out to a couple of other stage managers as they come to mind. This is not going to be exhaustive, but I just, this, there, one person who comes to mind is Celeste Thompson. She stage managed a co-production that we did, Greenway, when I was production manager with Cornerstone Theater Company, and that's where I met her, and she was just fantastic. And we've remained friends via, social media over the years. She did something funny, interesting, like lovely funny. At some point, she moved, she left the theater, I think, and started working with Doctors Without Borders. And she was traveling all over the world, all these amazing exotic places. And at some point she contacted me. I think she contacted several people, but she was like, look, I'm traveling to all these places. She's like, I'm traveling to all these places and I'm seeing all these amazing things, but I don't really have anybody to communicate with. And I thought it would be cool if I could send postcards to people. And she's like, so if you send me the name and address of somebody you want me to send a postcard to, I'll send them a postcard anonymously. And then she started doing this lovely thing where she would send these anonymous postcards to people from all over the world. And I don't know who else took her up on this on this offer, but my daughter started getting anonymous postcards from all over the place. And they were like, she was like, who's sending me these postcards? And they'd be the beautiful from all over. And I was like, oh, you must have some friends out there. Another friend of the family who had suffered an injury. I was like, I had her send some to him. And then at some point I saw that he was like, who is sending these postcards? And it was just really cool. Anyway, I just thought of that because I'm talking about Celeste. But she was an amazing stage manager. Crystal Munson, who I worked with in one capacity or another on several shows. And she ended up specifically stage managing two shows for that I was directing for the Actors Studio, Women of Manhattan and Cat's Paw, and she was kind of instrumental in getting me into those directing jobs for those shows. But she was just amazing, good dear friend, and loved hanging out. She was amazing and always brought so much to the table when she was stage managing these shows. So thank you, miss her. Steve Amamoto. Steve just managed to come out and see a show I directed here, this I Am Frankenstein, and in Vancouver, one of the few opportunities I've had to sneak out from under my obligations and actually get into a theater. I directed a show, and Steve Amamoto happened to be in town, and he came and saw the show, and it was so amazing to see him. And he stage managed a couple of things at Greenway Court Theater and just really enjoyed his experience. And then he stage managed Butterflies of Uganda, that I wrote and directed with my friend Zunka Weiss. And then he stage managed Someone Who'll Watch Over Me that I worked on with my friends Ben Fitch and Brendan Shanahan and Neva Durrell. Anyway, it was so it's great. So I'm glad I'm making these relationships with these people who are, and just, Deborah Freeman Gasper, who did stuff in undergrad. I saw her starting out, and now she's like teaches stage management at the University of Notre Dame, or runs the Shakespeare program there or something. I'm not exactly sure what she's doing, but she came out to visit in LA, and she's just really on top of the game. So a shout out there. And anyway, there's a litany of stage managers that I could probably name, but I just wanted to drop those names and say thank you and admonish all of you actors out there, all of you directors and theater people, thank your stage manager, please.